Another week brings another brand new episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, the podcast housing a safe and open listening space for all you casual fans to hear casual, cold, and even the dumbest takes on the world of WWE, All Elite Wrestling, the NFL, and sports in general without judgment. Hey everyone, how's your week been? I am your host, DylanLasagna, here to bring you more really weird takes on the world of sports. And you might be wondering about the theme of today's episode. You are kind of wondering why NFL? I thought the NFL season was all said and done with. Why are you trying to be like this media conglomerate, like talking about the NFL when the NFL offseason is still like fresh, fully underway? Well, you're technically correct, listener. You're technically correct, viewer on YouTube. You are absolutely correct. The NFL season, the 2020 NFL season has ended like pretty much just a little over a week ago. It ended with Super Bowl 55. But I can't help but think that we have to like put a bow on this season. Like we have to put a wrap on like at least most of the NFL talk here on this podcast, at least for like a while, obviously till September when the NFL season starts to come up again. We have to talk about my team, like my favorite team, my favorite NFL team. Now it sounds weird, but for you guys, but because you obviously have your own favorite sports team, and whether it's in the NFL, the NBA, or even other sports. But I've been wanting to talk about my team for a while, and their season this year. And as you can tell by the title, the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about the San Francisco 49ers. And, well, for all my Niners fans, we know how this season pretty much went for us this year. But before we get into pretty much talking about how this season like went for us, and it's going to, trust me, if you haven't heard a season recap on the San Francisco 49ers by now, you're going to be in for a long listen of pretty much sadness, but at the same time, glimmer of hope. I promise you that. So before we get into the season recap for the San Francisco 49ers, we got to do them plugs like we got to do on the podcast. In case you missed the previous two episodes of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, please go check them out. The first one last Friday, where we put a wrap on the whole NFL season. Obviously, we got to put the official bow with the recap we're about to do in just a bit. But in case you missed the recap of Super Bowl 55, go listen to it on wherever you get your podcast or on the YouTube channel. And this past Sunday on Valentine's Day, we did a retro review on WWE or WWF at the time, St. Valentine's Day Massacre back in 1999. So in case you missed that episode from Valentine's Day on February 14th, you can check that out as well on the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. If you aren't subscribed to me, to this podcast here on YouTube, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Subscribe to me here now. It really helps me a lot. Click the like button, or you can click the dislike button too, and you can leave a comment. And if you are subscribed, turn on that notification bell so you'll be notified of each and every vodcast that goes up on the channel, as well as exclusive extras that I don't cover on the audio listening platforms, as well as like clips that are coming up for this for the YouTube channel. And yeah, just make sure you subscribe, turn on the bell, like, dislike, comment, do what you can to support the YouTube channel. Now, if you listen to the podcast or your podcast in general in an audio format, you can listen to the Very Cold Lasagna podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor FM. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna, so you can check out what's coming up for this podcast, or you just want to see what I like to follow on like social media or whatever my interests are. Now let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers and their 2020 season. Going into this season, they were the reigning NFC champions, coming off a 13-3 season, their best season in years. I'd say since Jim Harbaugh left the 49ers. And like 2019 was kind of, I guess you could call it a culmination of the culture change that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were trying to rebuild ever since, former general manager Trent Baalke trying to destroy from within. But anyway, 2019, again, miles better than years past, and you got a lot of good play, especially on the defensive side. And Robert Saleh coordinated a bunch of good players. He coached them really well on the defensive front seven. They had a defensive line that had now Indianapolis Colts defensive end DeForest Buckner, along with Eric Armstead, the number 2 overall pick, Nick Bosa from the 2019 NFL draft, and Dee Ford when he was healthy. So that defensive line was stacked. Was really stacked. And then you got a secondary that played much better than the previous years. You had playmakers with Richard Sherman, K'Wan Williams, Emmanuel Mosley, safety Jimmy Ward, Jaquiski Tartt had an okay year in 2019, and Fred Warner was starting to come together before having, obviously, his breakout year in the following year, in 2020, this season. And the offense did its part too. We'll get to Jimmy Garoppolo in a second. George Kittle had another great season. The running game became key here too, with Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman leading the charge before running back Raheem Mostert had his breakout moments, especially in the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers. And once they traded for Emmanuel Sanders from the Denver Broncos at the time, the Niners offense got their supposed top receiver at the time for Jimmy Garoppolo. So they got that jolt that they needed. Now let's talk a little bit about Jimmy G. He was coming off the ACL injury suffered the year prior in 2018, and in his return, he was solid. And when you needed him, he was either going to help you or he was going to screw you over. But it wasn't like in like the following year or a couple years prior where he was doing all right. He was doing all right. He's still helping the Niners win key games, like against the Rams, where he threw this long downfield throw to a wide open Emmanuel Sanders against a burned Rams secondary to set up that game-winning field goal in Week 16, and then good pass to George Kittle in Week 14 against the New Orleans Saints, where he just plowed his way through field goal range despite a face mask penalty. But you still would see Jimmy Garoppolo have his limitations. He would stand in the pocket too long, and he would throw too high or like throw erratically, and it would end in a little bit of a few ways: an interception, getting hit, or the receiver like it reaches for it but falls incomplete, or it gets tipped by the receiver and then it gets intercepted, or he eats a sack, like a big sack that cost Niners yardage. So Jimmy Garoppolo, like, you could tell that he didn't feel the same, but he was still in that situation where you either gonna like help you or he was gonna screw you over. But he did more of helping the Niners, and Kyle Shanahan did enough to mask those limitations throughout that season too. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't mask Jimmy Garoppolo's limitations with a running game, a good defense, like in 2019, because when they got to the Super Bowl, when they were leading against the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes and the offense was starting to come back to life in the fourth quarter. Well, when Kyle Shanahan needed Jimmy G to be hero, he couldn't do it. And again, it's also on Kyle Shanahan. I don't know why he was calling passes when he needed to take care of the football, run the ball more. But Jimmy G couldn't get the ball downfield in the fourth quarter. He couldn't throw the ball for first downs. He was just throwing check down Charlies. And when he had a chance to win the game, he overthrew Emmanuel Sanders for the potential game-winning touchdown. Just by so much. And the defense eventually got gassed because the offense couldn't save them. So that kind of that was a little bit concerning on the offense, but despite the loss, they had an opportunity to make improvements in the coming offseason, hopefully make a big return trip to the Super Bowl 55. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But as for their 2020 offseason, last year, they traded DeForest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts because they probably had a sense that he was going to ask for big money, and the Niners had to pick between Eric Armstead or DeForest Buckner because they couldn't keep both of them, and it's still debatable whether it was worth keeping Eric Armstead, but nonetheless, they traded DeForest Buckner to the Colts for a first-round pick in that year's draft, and what they did with that pick was get Javon Kinlaw, and we're going to go back and forth here on their offseason because there's a lot to unpack here. And in the free agency, they mostly went in-house. They re-signed the likes of Jimmy Ward, Eric Armstead, Jason Verrett, Kendrick Bourne, Jeff Wilson, Ronald Blair. Pretty much, they just kept everybody in-house because with the the very little money that they had, and with the very little money that they had, they lost Emmanuel Sanders to the New Orleans Saints, and with the loss of Sanders, Niners once again lacked a top receiver. So going into the draft, they had to address not just a receiver, and not just a defensive tackle, which they eventually addressed with Javon Kinlaw, but they also had to address an offensive tackle in the third day of the NFL draft because, well, on that third day of the 2020 NFL draft, their veteran tackle, Joe Staley, announced his retirement. So, in essence, they were losing a key piece of their offensive line, but they were also losing their leader in the locker room and on the team. So, to offset the losses, again, they drafted Javon Kinlaw, and then in the first round they traded back up to get Brandon Ayuk with the 25th pick from the Minnesota Vikings. And in day 3, when they learned that Joe Staley was retiring, they traded some picks to Washington to get Trent Williams, the offensive tackle. So he was an All-Pro and Pro Bowl left offensive tackle. So they were hoping that Trent Williams would be a good signing for a good trade for 2020 and hopefully beyond, because after going to this offseason, he's going to be a free agent and he can't be franchise tagged. So they were hoping for at least a 1-year benefit, and hopefully they can re-sign him. So the free agency and the draft over and done with, the Niners were looking ahead towards training camp. But unfortunately, since they were still in the COVID-19 pandemic, and California was and still is in the worst of the pandemic, the Niners didn't start training camp until at least August. Yeah, that was bad. Now, granted, that's in fairness. A lot of teams in the NFL didn't start training camp till either late July or like early August. So, still, the Niners were at a disadvantage, and no one had a preseason, and there are a lot of concerns for obviously the Niners and every team in the NFL on how well they were going to play and how healthy they were going to play heading into the regular season with no preseason, barely any training camp, no off-season training activities. So it was going to be interesting. So when they went into that matchup with the Arizona Cardinals at home, they looked okay from the start. Jimmy Garoppolo still remained the same, standing in the pocket as usual, but he wasn't making any mistakes yet, and it looked to seem that they were going to be fine because they had a 10-0 lead against the Cardinals. Jimmy Garoppolo was being all right, solid, and Raheem Mostert still the efficient running back that he was when he had that breakout game against the Packers. But unfortunately, as time went on in that game, Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't move the offense. For some reason, he was throwing high passes and he was taking sacks. He wasn't moving around the pocket when he needed to. He was in a stand. He was pretty much a statue once again, and he's like the high pass that he threw near the end of the first half was costly because when you tried to throw one to George Kittle late in the first half, George Kittle got hurt. His knee got buckled by Chandler Jones, and Kittle exited the game, and he was out for a couple weeks. So eventually the Niners would lose that game to the Cardinals 24-20. But I was going to write that off as an early L, and hopefully they win the next couple of games because they had a pretty good slate. The Jets, the New York Jets, the New York Giants, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Miami Dolphins. Not a bad slate. Not a bad 4-game slate. At least on paper. At least on paper. So it was an early L. Move on to the next. So they started their 2-game East Coast New York swing at the Jets, and things looked to be okay. I thought Jimmy Garoppolo at the Jets looked much better. Not too much check down Charlie here, and he already had 2 touchdowns in the second quarter. Raheem Mostert had that 80-yard touchdown on the opening play of the game, and I totally forgot about the tight end from the Washington football team who signed with the Niners this season. Jordan Reed, he when healthy, showed he could be a good complement to George Kittle in this game. So there were some good things in that game against the Jets because, well, the Jets are the Jets, and the Niners were already leading up big in that game. But unfortunately, all the positives were pretty much thrown out the window because, yeah, that's when InjuryMania started to run wild on the 49ers, brother. InjuryMania. What you gonna do when InjuryMania runs wild on you? So it all started when Nick Bosa got injured 5 minutes into the game, and he had to be carted off the field. Solomon Thomas then soon followed thereafter. 2 plays later, onto the cart with. Then it was both revealed that both of them tore their ACLs, and they were pretty much done for the season. And then later in the second quarter, Jimmy Garoppolo suffered a high ankle sprain in the second quarter that would eventually affect him for the rest of the season. And then Raheem Mostert would leave, Tevin Coleman would leave. So even though the Niners would win that game, I mean, it's the Jets. Yeah. At what cost? At what cost? All I could say is, like, this recap is nowhere near done, but this was the game that single-handedly ended the Niner season. No question. Looking back at it. Looking back at this season now. There's still a lot of season to cover. This game against the Jets pretty much ended any and all hope of the Niners season. And it's just like, how worse can it get, right? It was just like, how worse could it get? So, obviously, we took care of the Giants in the next week, but when it came to week 4 against the Eagles, we had Nick Mullins at quarterback, and you were going up against a also injured riddled team in the Eagles, and yet the Niners couldn't get the job done against one of the worst defenses in the NFL, the Eagles, the NFC least Eagles. Nick Mullins couldn't beat them. So Nick Mullins was pretty much like Jimmy Garoppolo light. He was throwing check down Charlies. He was being conservative with the football. He even threw a pick 6 that pretty much like sold this team out in this game, and that resulted in him being inactive for the game against the Miami Dolphins the next week. So, speaking of the Dolphins game in week 5, Jimmy Garoppolo got rushed back into this game, and when they suffered their worst loss of the season in a big-time blowout to Ryan Fitzpatrick, of all people. In that game, Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you remember, Niners fans, he repeatedly went after this practice squad cornerback. Because there was nobody left to play. We didn't have Richard Sherman, who was inactive since after week 1, and I don't think Jason Verrett was there either, and Ahkello Witherspoon was there, but he wasn't 100%. Emmanuel Mosley wasn't there either, and K'Wan Williams wasn't there also. So Niners had to pretty much play backup corners, and look what happened. They got burned big time. And again with Jimmy Garoppolo, yes, he had the high ankle sprain, and he was clearly affected by it, but he still threw 2 bad interceptions, and also didn't help that the O-line had a very bad day. So they do win the next 2 games against the LA Rams, and I'll admit the LA Rams game was pretty good for Jimmy Garoppolo. Much better game. Took care of the football. Very little mistakes. And also against the New England Patriots, he did throw 2 interceptions, but the defense had a pretty good game. Raheem Mostert also had a pretty good game. But it was at Seattle where the team pretty much no-showed. They pretty much no-showed that game, and Seattle ran all over them. And that was also during that game that once again Jimmy Garoppolo exited the game, re-aggravating that ankle injury, and pretty much never saw the field for the rest of the season. George Kittle also exited with his own ankle sprain, but he was able to return later in the season when the Niners were already well out of the playoff picture. So the Niners would go 2-4 after that. 2-6 after the Seattle game, like getting blown up by the Packers and the Saints before the bye, and then honestly their 2 wins came from the division, beating the LA Rams and the Arizona Cardinals, 2 teams that were fighting for playoff positioning. I'd say I guess you could say the Arizona Cardinals win in week 16 was honestly their best win of the season, because pretty much you had it was pretty much a culmination of, well, there is nobody on our team anymore. Everyone's out with injuries. We're pretty much starting like every imaginable backup, every imaginable third string quarterback in CJ Beathard. We just signed Josh Rosen. At least George Kittle is back. Fred Warner is still there. Kerry Hyder Jr. is having himself a contract year. And well, right there's, I guess, I don't know if Raheem Mostert was still playing by that point, but I don't remember. It's been 2 months. But nonetheless, they had a really good defensive effort, and the offense under Beathard played well, took care of the football, and pushed the ball downfield in which Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Mullins failed to do. And they looked motivated. They looked well positioned, well motivated to play their sort of branded football. And they pretty much shut down Kyler Murray that day. They limited him, and it eventually cost them a playoff spot. So they closed out their season in pretty much a fight. Like they're pretty much going down fighting against Seattle. And even though they didn't win, again, they just fought to the very end. They made it close, and in all honesty, just be glad that their season was over. They ended up with the most injuries in the NFL that season, and I'm just glad that their season was over, because it was just brutal to watch. It was just very brutal to watch, seeing all the injuries, especially in week 2 against the Jets. That was pretty much the game that single-handedly ended their season. That was the game that single-handedly ended the Niners season. But despite the season being a lost one, if the Niners being the latest victim of the Super Bowl curse, the Niners did have some promises here. Did have some positives that some can be proud of next season. Others have some other positives, or maybe some negatives too. So Robert Saleh, his efforts, even with a depleted defensive line, a depleted secondary, he coached his ass off. With the limited supporting cast that he had, he made them play. He still made them work their ass off, especially with players like Kerry Hyder Jr., Javon Kinlaw, and Fred Warner having good years, and Kinlaw having showing his glimpses of potential. He how do I say it? He did enough. He did so well, in the face of adversity, and well, that's he did enough to get the New York Jets head coaching job. That's what earned it for him. I think this is when adversity hit him in the face, he proved that I'm gonna go down fighting. I'm gonna go down fighting, and that's what Robert Saleh did. He coached his ass off for the players, and he's gonna bring a good culture to the New York Jets organization. Hopefully, change it for the better. And I haven't touched on a lot about Brandon Ayuk in this recap, but he had a good rookie season. He was a good pickup in the draft, and even with the revolving door of quarterback play, if they get another wide receiver and you pair him up with, if you pair that wide receiver with him and Deebo Samuel, and hopefully Jalen Hurd finally has a healthy year, that could be a good receiver depth chart, if you know what I mean. So obviously the 49ers competitive play became better after the bye week, especially on defense. On offense, you would see mixed results, but when you put CJ Beathard in those 2 games, you notice that the offense started playing with more motivation around him. You just weren't getting anything done with Nick Mullins or Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm sorry to say it, Garoppolo lovers, but at least CJ Beathard, he can push the ball downfield. He has that rocket arm. He doesn't. Yes, he still throws the check down Charlies, but not every other play. He throws it. He throws it sometimes, but he also goes aggressive. CJ Beathard went aggressive when he needed to, and not only that, he took care of the football. Did you see how many times Nick Mullins threw interceptions or got strip sacked? Yikes. So CJ Beathard was okay. He wasn't great by any means. Obviously, we've seen the film of CJ Beathard when he started in years past, but he was just average. He was just all right. So I think out of all three quarterbacks, CJ Beathard in 2 games was better. And that's not saying much against Nick Mullins and Jimmy Garoppolo. So not only that, the Niners would finish an even 3-3 against the NFC West, despite finishing 6-10 and dead last in the division, and with the most injuries in the NFL. While they did get swept by Seattle, they did again sweep the LA Rams and get a crucial win against the Arizona Cardinals that again eventually eliminated them from the postseason. So this 2020 NFL season for the Niners was everything but the so-called revenge tour that everyone was hyping up. Let's not do that again. Let's go into this 2021 season hoping that everyone's healthy. Let's just keep it simple at that. The healthy year, for once. So, no preseason, the very little training camp, and I guess the Super Bowl curse. It hurt the Niners' chances to just even make the playoffs this year. Injuries all around, bad quarterback play, sometimes bad play calling too. It affected the team because of it. So hopefully next year everyone's back healthy. Of course, you got to make decisions in free agency and in the draft. But the main thing is staying healthy, staying consistently healthy for all 16 games. And as long as they can do that, they can make a playoff run. But now we get to the offseason. Now we get to free agency. Now we get to the draft. What do the Niners need this offseason? They have about $21 million cap space. I don't know how they had originally $9 million. I looked at overthecap.com. They had originally $9 million, but then it suddenly jumped to $21 million. I don't know where the extra extra $11 million came from, but $21 million is $21 million. So they pretty much had the same amount as the last NFL offseason. So it's still not much to spend. It's still not too much to spend. So they're going to have to make some tough choices here on who they want to keep, who they want to delete. And they got a lot of in-house free agents this time around. And they got to choose wisely. They already re-signed running back Jeff Wilson Jr. and Austin Walter. And they also re-signed quarterback Josh Rosen, who I think is going to be the backup next year. They're all 3 of those guys are re-signed to 1-year deals. So they at least got some depth there. They already got depth at the running back and quarterback positions. But you got a lot of free agents to address here, like Trent Williams, K'Wan Williams, Jaquaski Tart, Jordan Reed, Jason Verrett, Emmanuel Mosley, Daniel Brunskill, Kerry Hyder, Kendrick Bourne, Kyle Juszczyk, Marcel Harris, DJ Jones. There's probably a lot more out there that I didn't mention, but that's just a laundry list of names who are either unrestricted, restricted, exclusive rights free agents that John Lynch has to decide who he wants to keep. You also had to think about whether or not you want to restructure or release Dee Ford, Weston Richburg, and even Jimmy Garoppolo, because all 3 of those guys haven't really contributed much. They even haven't contributed much, or they haven't been able to stay healthy on their time in San Francisco. So if you cut Dee Ford and Weston Richburg, you can save up to $23 million, and you get around to $34 million in cap space. But if you also cut Jimmy Garoppolo, then you get about $53 million cap space. So you get even more cap space to spend, and you can use it to invest. But you'd also have to use some of that cap space to invest in a quarterback. So you got a lot of choices to make. You have to make a lot of difficult choices to make here, John Lynch. So I have a list here of some offseason needs for the Niners in order of importance here. The most important thing they got to do is whether they get a quarterback or keep Jimmy Garoppolo, is re-sign Trent Williams. And Trent Williams was very good for the Niners offensive line. He was a very good trade. And for however much you can, for however much he wants, re-sign the guy. And not only that, get a center. Alex Mack has been wanting to play from the Falcons. He's a free agent. Yes, he's old, but he still wants to play for Kyle Shanahan. But if he could get someone that's younger, that's like Alex Mack, who's younger, but still is as good as him, then I'm all for it. But center is a position that certainly needs some addressing, along with the right side of the offensive line at tackle and guard. So, because that right side of the offensive line was something that was frequently attacked by opposing defenses, and that resulted in all three quarterbacks taking so many hits and sacks throughout the season. And for the second thing that they needed to address is the secondary, because there's a lot of free agents coming from the secondary. I don't expect Richard Sherman to be back. He doesn't expect to be back with the Niners because of their very little cap space. So my key free agents to re-sign here are K'Waun Williams, Emmanuel Mosley, Jason Verrett. Those three guys I'd keep. Although with Jason Verrett, with his injury history during his time with the Chargers, I hope that he's at least reasonable, considering he should know himself about his injury history, that he takes at least a good salary. I don't know what good salary would mean. Maybe not like super big salary, like 65 million 4 years. That's too much for a player that had a lot of injuries throughout his career already. But he has to be reasonable here. He has to be reasonable with what he wants. But and John Lynch, don't overpay the guy either. So K'Waun Williams, Emmanuel Mosley, Jason Verrett, you're lock down your cornerbacks, re-sign them. And then for safeties, you can re-sign Marcel Harris. He's not the greatest, but you can add some depth and at the quarterback, and maybe if you find someone in free agency at the draft that's probably better. And if you keep Jimmy Garoppolo, you can use the 12th pick to select the best cornerback prospect. I don't know who that is, but there'll probably be someone good out there. Now, the third thing, and I know it's a lot, it should be number one, but again, offensive line and secondary are probably the most important things here for me. But the third thing here is quarterback. Let me talk a little bit about Jimmy Garoppolo. It kind of baffles me here why people are so into Jimmy Garoppolo. I like Jimmy as a person. I like Jimmy Garoppolo. He's humble. He's respectful. He's changed the culture of the Niners organization since he was traded here from New England. And I like his attitude. I really like his leadership, his attitude, and what he brings to the Niners. As a person, as an individual, but as football wise, as I mentioned before, he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. He throws the ball too high. He throws very erratically. He throws way too many interceptions. He can't move around the pocket for some reason anymore, like he did in those 5 games when he was traded to San Francisco. He's like the Tom Brady without the it factor. He's like a super pocket quarterback, a super pocket passer that just doesn't want to move outside the pocket. Like, could you at least move outside the pocket? You don't have to move super like super Naruto or anything, but move outside the pocket. Find your receivers. Don't eat. You're eating way too many sacks, man, by staying in the pocket too long. So I just don't get the hype around Jimmy Garoppolo. So, not only that, he's only had one fully healthy season out of 4. The 4 seasons that he's been in San Francisco. That's an F. That's an F for poor attendance. Yes, in that one season in 2019, they went to the Super Bowl. And yes, he's had really good games against the Rams, the Packers, the Seahawks, the Cardinals twice, and the Saints. Now, Rams, Packers, Seahawks, 2 times against the Cardinals, and the Saints. 5 games. 5 games where Jimmy Garoppolo really came in clutch. That's out of 16. That's not much. That's really not a good sample size. That is really not a good sample size. So, in contrast, he's needed pretty much everything around him to be perfect in order for him to win. So he needed a good running game led by Raheem Mostert, Matt Breida, and Tevin Coleman. So he pretty much needed all 3 of those guys, especially Mostert, to play really well. And he needed the defense to not get tired out, so Kyle Shanahan can mask his mistakes. And the ones that I have already mentioned so many damn times that I'm not going to mention it again. So, in a nutshell, he has so many limitations that he needs everything around him to be perfect. He's only played 6 of the 16 games this year, and he's only had one fully healthy season. That was 2019. I get it. I know some people like Jimmy Garoppolo for what he is. He's a team leader. He's a great individual, but on the field, he just doesn't have it. He can't get us there long term. We've seen what happened in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I don't see it. I don't see it, people. So just because Jimmy Garbage Glasspolo has this 22-8 starter record, everyone keeps using as like their valid defense, their valid arguing point that Jimmy Garoppolo needs to stay. Like John Lynch needs to keep Jimmy Garoppolo for however long term. Let's run it back in 2021. That doesn't invalidate the fact that, again, everything around him needed to be perfect. He also missed so many games. He only had one fully healthy season where he played all 16 games. Had he played all 4 of his seasons fully healthy, who knows what if his record would have been. Who knows what his record would have been. So, with that being said, John Lynch needs to take a really hard look at quarterback options this season because, well, the NFC West is going to be a dogfight. Now, I could say that so early on because, well, it's the offseason and everything can change between here in February and all the way to September. But right now, you got an NFC West that has Russell Wilson, who even with a terrible offensive line, is playing like he's still playing well. Kyler Murray, who I think like he still has room to improve, but he's getting there. And now you got Matthew Stafford, who finally has a supporting cast around him, and hopefully the Rams build around him. So, like, if the Rams ever want to get him a ring, well, help him out, help the man out, so he doesn't forever be Pat Stafford. So John Lynch has to decide what to do with Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason because, yeah, he has a $26 million that's going to become fully guaranteed by April. I don't know when in April, but sometime in April. So Lynch has got to decide what to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. I imagine like they're going to either keep him, delete him, or trade him. So if they keep Jimmy Garoppolo, which most likely is what's going to happen, unfortunately, and they're going to eat that $26 million of fully guaranteed money, And that's pretty much what's going to stop us from spending anything in free agency. So if Jimmy Garoppolo stays, obviously you got Josh Rosen already re-signed for 2021, so he'll probably be your backup. But you also got to have a quarterback, another quarterback. Draft the best quarterback prospect possible. You need to have a third quarterback that could create some motivation for Jimmy Garoppolo for whatever reason. Like, light a fire in him. Make him feel pressured to win. Make him feel pressured to get better. So, draft the best possible quarterback prospect with the 12th pick in the draft. Yes, we have other team needs, but apparently this is a very good quarterback class for this draft, and we may not get even the third best one by pick 12, but get whatever get whatever you see is the best one by the 12th pick, and have Kyle Shanahan groom him for 2020 for that season. So if you release Jimmy Garoppolo, which I don't know if that's going to happen, most unlikely, you could still use the number one overall pick. We're not the Jaguars here. Use the 12th overall pick to select the best remaining quarterback prospect available, and have them compete with Josh Rosen, or you can somehow trade up to get a Trevor Lawrence or Zach Wilson. Whatever you give up, it remains to be seen. I don't know what they would give up. Probably another first round pick to get, to get into the top 5. You can also either draft a quarterback, but also sign a veteran quarterback. I don't know who would that be, and have the rookie sit and learn for 2021. It's not the scenario that fans would like, but it's, I don't know, it would be an interesting one. Then there's the possibility of it's very unlikely, but it's also not impossible. Dak Prescott from the Cowboys, he's an unrestricted free agent. For some reason, the Cowboys don't want, are not signing him yet to a long-term deal. I don't know what it is. Are the Cowboys not valuing him as a long-term starter, or is it the other way around? Is Dak Prescott overvaluing himself? But that remains to be seen. I don't see it. I don't find it likely that Dak will go anywhere else other than the Cowboys. But crazier things have happened. Look what happened to Kirk Cousins. The Washington football team franchise tagged him twice, and yeah, that ended up great. So I don't think Dak Prescott is going to be an option, but there are still possibilities. If Jimmy Garoppolo agrees to a trade, there are two ways they can go about it. You can send them to New England, back to New England. They can probably give up the same thing that they gave up back in 2017, some second and third round picks and Jimmy Garoppolo back to the Patriots, and while getting a second and fourth round pick in return. Or you can, I don't know how likely this is going to be and how willing John Lynch wants to go on this. But I know Niners fans are going to rile me on this. Deshaun Watson. How about Deshaun Watson, huh? Why not go for a quarterback about to enter in his prime, 25 years old, playing at at a level that's very elite and probably going to be even better when he reaches his prime. Yet he's being held hostage by a very terrible organization in the Houston Texans. Cal McNair, just let him go. Like, if he doesn't want to play for your ass, honor his request. You already honored J.J. Watt's release. Why can't you let Deshaun Watson go? Yes, he was your supposed franchise quarterback, but you mishandled everything else. You didn't give him the help that you needed. So let him go where he wants to be respected. He's not going to get any earned respect in Houston because you keep screwing up his career, Mr. McNair. So, again, I don't want to make this a whole Texans rant, but I just like with Dak Prescott, this is probably at this point a Deshaun Watson trade to the 49ers is unlikely. Plus, it would also be very costly. And I don't know the GM would also want Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade package. But even then, even if he wanted Jimmy Garoppolo, he would probably want another player too. Probably a star player. Yeah, it's going to be that. I just find it very unlikely at this point. Because you also, along with 3 first-round picks at minimum, and if you offer Jimmy Garoppolo, the Texans are probably going to want someone like Nick Bosa. Yeah, that ain't happening, man. That ain't happening. So, I don't know. Crazier things have happened. But I don't know. They could go all in for Deshaun Watson, but it's just going to be very pricey. It's going to be very pricey, and I don't know if it'll be worth it for John Lynch. But the most likely thing that they do at quarterback, and while it stings me, is they're going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. And, well, 6-10, 7-9, mediocrity, here we come. So other team needs that we have to address in the offseason is re-signing other offensive and defensive role players like Jordan Reed. When he was healthy during the season, he was active for a lot of the games, but Kyle Shanahan didn't use him a lot. But when he did, he was a good compliment. He was a good compliment to George Kittle, like rotating him and Kittle. So I would re-sign Jordan Reed, and hopefully Jordan Reed understands that the Niners gave me an opportunity to play when I was on the verge of retiring, and maybe I can have a second. Like, this team could be my second chance of being like recapturing my magic or mojo in the NFL. So, like, maybe a team-friendly deal with Jordan Reed to once again help him get his career back on track, like for another 2 years or so. It should also re-sign wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, fullback Kyle Juszczyk. I think the best thing that Kyle Juszczyk should do is re-sign with the Niners, because with the way that fullbacks are being used in the NFL, they're not being like used as like greatly as the Niners use Juszczyk. So I don't know how, like, where Kyle Juszczyk is gonna go and be an effective role player like the way the Niners use him. So I think the best thing to do is just re-sign with the Niners. And some other role players like DJ Jones and Kerry Hyder should also re-sign, because just because 1 year makes you a good player doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all. And then you also have to start thinking about John Lynch. He also has to start thinking about extending Fred Warner, the middle linebacker. He's had an incredibly good year that resulted in him getting All-Pro honors. So I think it should be time for Lynch to consider extending him. Whether it's, I don't know if it's going to be this offseason, but next offseason. I don't know if he's going to be a free agent next offseason, but I think it's time to start considering extending Fred Warner. So those are my personal offseason needs for the 49ers. It was like an extensive laundry list because, well, obviously the Niners have a big laundry list that of needs that they need to address if they want to get back to the postseason and potentially go back to the Super Bowl. So, speaking of their path back to the playoffs. We can touch on Super Bowl dreams when we get to there for the Niners. Looking at the 2021 opponents to wrap things up here. The schedule didn't come out yet. It doesn't come out till April or May, but they have the list of opponents already for 2021. And as long as they stay healthy, as long as the Niners themselves stay healthy, the 2021 opponents right now don't look too bad. They don't look too bad. Now, you already have Seattle, Arizona, Los Angeles to contend with already twice because you're within the division. But you got the Green Bay Packers, who obviously have Aaron Rodgers. But outside of that, you got a Detroit Lions team that's rebuilding with, Jared Goff, who you're very well familiar with, Niners. Then you also got a Chicago Bears team who probably will be, I don't know, they'll probably be going through that cycle of mediocrity with whoever their QB is, whether it's Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles, or who knows. The Bears might even trade for Carson Wentz and send Nick Foles back to the Eagles. But more on the Eagles later. And then you also got the Minnesota Vikings, who are rebuilding their defense because their defense was very bad in the 2020 season. And you don't know which Kirk Cousins you're going to get because he was wildly inconsistent. Like, not just in 2020, but very often. And outside of the NFC West, outside of the NFC North, you get two opponents based on your division placement. So obviously we finished dead last in the division. So we drew the Atlanta Falcons, who also finished last in the NFC South. So they have a new head coach. They still have Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, but they still have a defense that's still very suspect. And the Falcons' story from 2020 was that they were blowing a lot of big leads that looked like they were blowing the Super Bowl. They're 28-3 Super Bowl lead, like pretty much on a weekly basis. So they're still trying to they're still beatable, and right, at least on paper right now. So they're still trying to figure out who they are. And then you go on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles, who are likely going to be rebuilding too under Jalen Hurts, the new quarterback. So going outside the conference, the Niners get to face the AFC South, which is also a huge question mark. How are the Tennessee Titans going to be? How are they going to improve the defensive line, the secondary? What Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry going to look like? What year is it now under them? I think it's year 3 with them at the helm on the offense. What are the Titans going to look like as they look to defend their AFC South title? What are the Jaguars going to look like in their year 1 of the rebuild under what's likely going to be Trevor Lawrence from Clemson, and they got Urban Meyer as their head coach? What are the Texans even going to look like? Are they even going to have a team together? Is Deshaun Watson going to be somewhat convinced to come back and play for them? And what about the Indianapolis Colts? They got a team ready to go and compete for a Super Bowl. All they need is a quarterback. All they need is that one quarterback to take them there. So a lot of interesting questions. A lot of interesting questions for not just their opponents, but for the Niners themselves. They don't have a bad slate of opponents right now, and obviously, how their opponents are scheduled, it'll certainly dictate how their season goes. But at the same time, a lot of uncertainty surrounds themselves, especially like who John Lynch is gonna keep, who John Lynch is gonna delete, in both free agency and the draft, and a lot of uncertainty around Jimmy Garoppolo and what the Niners are going to do with him. So it should be an interesting offseason for the San Francisco 49ers. But if they don't do anything to address their team needs, then they're going to get buried real fast in 2021 and pretty much be dead stuck in the cellar of the NFC West, while they get to watch the likes of the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals duke it out for playoff spots throughout the 2021 season. So that's my recap of the 49ers 2020 NFL season. Again, they were the latest victim to get hit by the Super Bowl curse, and hopefully they bounce back in 2021. Hopefully everyone can stay healthy. Hopefully their strength and conditioning staff will be better next year, keeping them healthy. But at the end of the day, it's just my opinions. These are just my thoughts on the 49ers, what I think of my favorite team. They need to get better. They need they need to get better. They need to stay healthy. Quarterback play needs to be addressed. You have to decide on Jimmy Garoppolo. And hopefully if he stays, he needs to improve, stay healthy, because health is his biggest problem right now. Because the best thing you need out of a quarterback, regardless of how he plays, is being there every single game for your team. So those are just my thoughts. And what do you guys think about the 49ers 2020 NFL season? What do you think their team needs are? Sound off, especially if you're on YouTube watching the vodcast. Let me sound off in the comments. If you watched or listened to the audio version, shoot me a comment on Twitter or on Instagram. Your thoughts on the 49ers season 2020 NFL season, or what they should do with like Jimmy Garoppolo or anything Niners related, Sound off on the 49ers in any way, in any shape possible. But that is it for this episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for joining me for this recap of the San Francisco 49ers and their 2020 NFL season. I'm not sure what next week is going to bring, but stay tuned to find out. But for now, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified of each and every vodcast that comes out, and extras that don't get shown or listened or uploaded to the audio platforms. And speaking of the audio platforms, make sure you listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor FM. And again, follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And until next time, keep that lasagna very cold and in the fridge with your coldest takes on the world of professional wrestling and sports. And I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone, and breathe that red and gold.